The second on point is on why all roads to peace in Ukraine pass through Donbass. Now, the tariff war has officially started. The Trump administration has issued a public notice regarding the additional 25% tariff on Indian goods entering the United States of America. The Department of Homeland Security published a notice which said that the increased levies would affect Indian products. Relations between New Delhi and Washington are on a downturn after US President Donald Trump doubled tariffs on Indian goods to a whopping 50%, including a 25% additional duty for India's purchase of Russian crude oil. New Delhi has stood firm against Trump's tariff tyranny. Prime Minister Narendra Modi has asserted that India will protect the interest of farmers and small businesses.
मेरे किसान भाइयों से कहूंगा, मेरे पशुपालक भाई बहन से कहूंगा, और मैं गांधी की धरती पे से बोल रहा हूं, मेरे देश के लघु उद्यमी हो, किसान हो, पशुपालक हो, हर किसी के लिए मैं आपको बार बार वादा करता हूं, मोदी के लिए आपके हित सर्वोपरि है.
Now let us look at the revised tariffs that will kick in from August 27th. Coffee, tea, cocoa, spices. Now this is 51.4%. Fish and other products is 50.7%. On chemicals it will be 52.7%. Textiles it will be 58%. Clothing it stands at 61.7%. Rubber, leather and footwear 54%. The tariffs threaten to disrupt India's access to the US, its largest export market, with shipment total near 87 billion in 2024. So what are the areas that require the attention of the Indian government? One, textile and apparel. It's worth 2.5 billion in exports. High tariffs could make Indian textiles costlier, reducing demand and impacting jobs. Jewelry and diamonds. India exported 9 billion worth of jewelry to the United States of America. Tariffs may hit demand for natural and lab-grown diamonds, gold, silver jewelry and colored gemstones. Now, electronic exports worth 14 billion. Currently duty-free, but the future tariff could hurt India's competitive edge. Pharmaceuticals. More than 30% of India's pharma export goes to US tariffs and could severely affect India's largest pharma market. Smartphones. India is the world's top smartphone supplier to US with 44% market share. Though currently exempt, future tariffs could affect competitiveness. The new Fitch Ratings have reaffirmed India's stable outlook, citing the country's resilient economic trajectory and sound external position. It says that the fallout from the US tariff risk will be limited. So, the rating status, India affirmed at BBB with stable outlook. Growth forecast 6.5% in financial year 25, financial year 26, 6.5% again, well above BBB median, which is 2.5%. Supporting factors: strong domestic demand, public capex push, solid external financing. Risk and concerns: private investment may slow, fiscal deficits, debt and governance indicators. Trump has used tariffs as a weapon to stop war. He claims the US president said he could stop 4 wars because the United States was armed with tariffs.
It was announced, CBO announced the numbers, and as you know, they gave no credit to tariffs. They said they made a mistake, that the trade deficit will be reduced because of Trump's tariffs, will be reduced by $4 trillion right? Is that what they said, right? They said $4 trillion, and the market went up like a rocket ship because the tariffs are good. Well, tariffs aren't that usual. If the 7 wars I stopped, 4 of them were because of the fact that I had tariffs and trade. And I was able to say, well, if you do this, if you go fight, and if you want to kill everybody, that's okay. But I'm going to charge you each 100% tariff when you trade with us. You know what? They all gave up. I stopped 7 wars.
Exporters had requested an emergency credit line guaranteeing scheme offering collateral-free working capital with the government-backed risk cover, but officials believe sector-specific interventions could be more effective. Now, what is India's response to 50% tariff? Strategic restraint, focus on diplomacy, and trade diversification. Sectoral support, MSMEs to get easier credit access. Export pivot, boosting trade with Europe, Africa, Southeast Asia. Energy security, look beyond Russian oil purchases. The increased duties place Indian exporters at a 30 to 35% disadvantage versus trade rivals in Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Japan. The 50% tariff could hit India's labor-intensive export sector more than other segments in hubs like Tamil Nadu, Uttar Pradesh, Gujarat, and West Bengal. So the big questions: how can India tap alternative export destinations like Germany, UK, Singapore, where demand for the Indian engineering products is growing? Second, does India require more bilateral arrangements? Third, what can the government do to protect farmers and traders' interests? Fourth, do we require some sort of internal rearrangement or reform? Now, on this issue, I'm joined by Professor Scott Lucas, Professor International Politics, Clinton Institute, University College of Dublin. Thank you so much, sir, for joining me. Ambassador Jen Dasgupta, former Ambassador to World Trade Organization. Dilip Chenoy, former Secretary General, FICCI. Thank you so much. And subsequently, I'll be joined by Professor Rakesh Mohan Joshi, Vice Chancellor, Indian Institute of Foreign Trade. Professor Lucas, this tariff war is on. So my question to you is, what should India be doing in order to buffer its MSMEs, its labor-intensive industries?
Well, I think first of all, India's made clear that it's not simply going to cave in to what is, and let's be honest here, this is the Trump administration's bullying. This is not about India's oil purchases from Russia, although I wish those would reduce because they do support Russia's invasion of Ukraine. But that's not why this is being done. This is being done because Trump and his advisors effectively operate this like an organized crime syndicate trying to shake countries down. And they just have decided that because India is not grateful enough to Donald Trump, especially over the war with Pakistan in April, that brief skirmish, they're going to punish India. Now, how do you react to that? I think, like other countries in the world, what you have to realize is that you have to look at other avenues in terms of your economic arrangements, in terms of your trade, in terms of your investment. The U.S. is not the only economy in the world, even though it may be the most important. I think you would talk about, for example, India's trade relationship with the European Union, where there's a great deal of opportunity. Remember that only a few weeks ago, India signed a historic trade agreement with the UK with potentially billions in investment and trade to be boosted by that. I think there are outlets in other parts of the world. Look, for example, to Canada, where India has had a very difficult political time over the past year. Repairing those political relations would seem to be in the interest of both countries, given the economic uncertainty. So you diversify your relationships outside the country and you support your industries inside the country. Here where I am, in Ireland, and we too are affected in sectors like pharma, in sectors like agriculture and dairy by the U.S. tariffs. The government has just announced an export support plan, and that is to work with industries to make sure that their supply chains are resilient, that their production capacity is resilient, and that their opportunities for new markets are encouraged.
Absolutely. Ambassador Jen Dasgupta, your opening comments, what should be India's pivot? Now it's happening.
I am in agreement with Professor Lucas. One of the things which is on the anvil, and India has expressed its intention to conclude the FTA with the EU by the end of this year. that would give a huge fillip to some of the industries which are going to get very badly affected by the US tariff increases. For instance, textiles and clothing, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and a few of our competitors have an edge of about 9.6%. And if the EU trade agreement were to get signed within the next 2-3 months, this advantage which the other competitors have will get evened out. So that is just one of the things which I wanted to point out. Of course, there would be additional market access for gems and jewelry, for leather products, for engineering goods, the whole works. Because from what has come out in the press, more than 90% of India's products will enjoy zero duty or near zero duty access immediately. So that is one very good thing which can happen if India were to successfully diversify and gain additional market access in the EU market. The UK agreement is indeed a landmark agreement because it is the first with a major developed country, barring, of course, Japan and Australia and Korea. But it would help us in, again, accessing a very large market. The only rider there is that the UK is going through its process of ratification. So it will probably take another 7-8 months at least before the benefits start flowing. Having said that, I think India is also trying to explore the opportunities that more unified BRICS can offer, and that is being explored with Russia, Brazil, China mainly, because India's exports to China are dwindling at about $17-18 billion, $16 billion for the past few years, whereas China's exports to India have been going at a steady clip, having, I think, crossed about $100 billion. So there is plenty of scope to increase our exports to other destinations other than the US. But of course, the damage that the loss of the US market will cause will be there for a few years at least if the tariffs continue to be pegged at that very high level.
Okay. Mr. Chinoy, the biggest worry right now is on the labor intensive sectors. Is there in short term a way in which these labor intensive sectors can be buffered, sir?
I think, very, very simply, there are things that the government can do. There are things that the financial institutions can do. And there are things that industry needs to do. And I think what we need here is a collaborative approach amongst the three. So, Mr. Jan Dasgupta talked about the different agreements that we are having. We heard yesterday the RBI governor talk about the central bank taking steps to reduce costs or do certain aspects for industry that are impacted by this. The Honorable Minister has talked about kind of looking at defraying certain taxes and going beyond what was generally accepted to actually tackle the impact of the US tariffs which are held. He also held a meeting with the different export promotion councils looking at what incentives or what other benefits it could do to actually reduce the impact of the tariffs. Industry, on the other hand, has to look at diversification. Even if you have a free trade agreement and if you don't have customers in that area and you don't have potential buyers, then there's no point of signing a free trade agreement or anything else. So therefore, industry has to diversify their export basket. They need to look at different customers going forward, and also looking at how much in the short or medium term, how much of this tariff they could kind of absorb going forward, because it's not going to be there permanently. As Professor Lucas said, that this is possibly a twin strategy. It's got greater geopolitical ramifications, and as we go forward, you might see this changing. So I think,
Mr. Chinoy, yes, that are you saying, sir, that we need to wait for Trump to chicken out, the taco theory?
No, I don't think it's a chicken out. See, he's a businessman, right? There are certain products and services that India supplies which are very essential to American businesses. You take the auto component industry, right? You can't, an OEM can't switch suppliers so quickly, right? Or you look at even pharmaceuticals, right? It's not very simple to change suppliers, even food, because a lot of these kind of facilities in the other countries are US FDA or certified by US regulatory authorities. So for them to switch to a different supplier is going to be a challenge. So there will be a lot of domestic pressure going forward. And I think if you see a Ukraine-Russia peace kind of thing or some development happening there, it will ease the pressure significantly, because one of his main, allegations or main concerns with India is that we are buying Russian crude, right? Or we are doing business with Russia. So if that overall geopolitical issue is solved, then you will find it very, very different going forward.
Okay, welcome Professor Joshi. Professor Joshi is the nirvana in the new bilateralism, but it may take time. For example, even the deal which we have done with United Kingdom, as Ambassador Jen Dasgupta was telling us, it will take time to fructify. There are a number of things which will happen over a period of time. So what you do today may not yield results tomorrow, but the impact of the tariff will be felt from the next month onwards.
No, you are very right. But I think US also need to understand that India is not a small country which can be bullied. And if you see, the impact is going to be on India, but its impact is going to be much bigger in American market, because say our generic pharmaceutical account for almost 40% in the US market. And there especially the public sector purchasing is dependent on the Indian pharmaceutical and the medicinal product, and they are going to have a big impact. In shrimp, they have already started feeling the heat in the American market, where the prices of the shrimp have started going to go up. So India would have a problem, but we are also trying, and India should try to diversify its market and to look into the markets which I think are underserved and more served. One problem comes, opportunity starts. You have seen last year the Chinese ambassador has talked about that a increased bilateral relationship and the increased trade between India and China and Russia as well. And India is, UK is yes, but anyway, UK FTA, it paves the way as a, very classic trade agreement which we signed with US, wherein, the sensitivities of both the countries have been considered, and in which, it's on a, very, very mutually beneficial level, the way that, there are our goods, say 99% of our goods are getting duty-free access there, and 90% of their goods getting. And unlike if you see the kind of the trade agreement which the US is signing, wherein if you see that almost 15% to 20% tariffs that these countries have to pay, you talk of Indonesia, you talk of the Vietnam, wherein they have to pay these tariffs, wherein the US goods are duty-free. So I think these are also very, very asymmetric kind of a trade agreement. You talk a trade agreement, these are basically pressure tactics which have been used. Trade agreements, say we signed a trade agreement with UK, it took 3 years, but generally a trade agreement takes several years. Ambassador Dasgupta knows it, how these trade agreements are being signed over a long period. But if you are trying to consolidate everything that you have signed it today in 15 days, 10 days, these are not trade agreements. These are absolutely not trade agreement. And then if you see, these are only very short term some sort of a compromises which these countries are doing. And I am very happy that India has talked about which the Prime Minister has talked on 15th of August, and even after that about the self-reliance and the proud India, because the sectors like the agriculture, dairy.
So you raise a very important point. Yes, I do understand that the cost will also be paid by the American public. Professor Lucas, CNN in its analysis, sir, says sneakflation. The word they have used is sneakflation. How Trump's tariffs are gradually raising cost for American consumers. So I do understand that what they have done in context of India will bear, their citizens are also going to bear the cost of it. But will it be enough to push Trump administration politically, sir?
Well, that's a massive question. I mean, where we stand right now is that, first of all, you're absolutely right that the
Not
first
my word, CNN has used it, sneakflation.
Yeah. Let's take this apart. First casualties of any tariff war are the people at home: American manufacturers, American farmers, American consumers. But you don't necessarily get an immediate spike in inflation because there are people who stockpile. For example, before these tariffs come in, you stockpile your goods so that you don't run into shortages immediately. Despite that, American inflation is already back up close to about 3%, which is higher than was expected. You're going to see, I think, a rolling out, an increase of inflation through the second half of this year. And you are already seeing the effects of this. Because of the inflation or the threat of inflation, the Federal Reserve cannot cut interest rates. That is why Donald Trump tried to fire one of the Federal Reserve governors in an unprecedented step yesterday. Because if you can't lower interest rates, the U.S. government continues to pay high interest on its spiraling government debt. So you don't have, this isn't sneakflation because it is out in the open. You're talking more about death by 1,000 cuts. You're going to see this happen over a period of weeks and months. The big question is, can the Trump administration use political diversions, putting the military onto U.S. streets, claiming that the left is the enemy within, stigmatizing immigrants, including immigrants from India? Can they use those political tactics to divert from the economic damage so that they can persist with this tactic?
Okay. Ambassador Dasgupta, do you think that despite public display of acrimony, there are ways in statecraft deploys itself and silently issues are worked out, the way India worked out its issues with the United States of America post Pokhran, Buddha to blast? Do you think that there's still some middle ground between New Delhi and American administration?
Yes, I do think so. And I think India has not switched off from the negotiating mode completely, though the US appears to have done so at the moment, because they have called off the visit of the US trade delegation which was due from yesterday for the 6th round of talks. So that's all right. It keeps, there are these ebbs and flows. But mind you, when you mention the Pokhran blast of 1998, it took several years for things to come back to an even keel, 8 years in fact, if my memory serves me right. So, this is not going to be a one-off thing and, India is going to forget, as has been mentioned also by Ambassador Nikki Haley, who used to be President Trump's ambassador to the UN. So these are things which are, likely to take a little bit of time, but India and the US have a very strong relationship lasting more than 100 years. And this is not just trade, it is economics, overall strategic relationship, including very important budding, military cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. It is about cultural ties, it is about educational ties, it is about technology sharing and joint development, and it is also about defense purchases. So to put it in just plain and simple tariff terms or trade terms, I think will be a mistake for all concerned.
Ambassador,
this is a narrative. Yes.
Ambassador, a lot of people would like to know, sir, is this just limited to the Trump administration, or there is a different thinking in the capital, in the United States of America, an overall change of outlook towards India?
Well, I don't think that is. I would share that view. I think it is.
I'm seeking your view. I'm seeking your view.
My view is that it is limited to the Trump administration at the moment and the close advisors on trade issues to President Trump, not to the entire Republican Party also or his support base. And I think, some wisdom to dawn on the people concerned. And also the inflationary effects were to start biting. And the third thing, the midterm election of November 2026,
Yes.
the closer it comes, there would be pressure, a backlash from the people and from the Republicans themselves. And President Trump would be forced to have a relook, and I'm sure there would be a rollback of the tariffs.
Okay, Mr. Chunai, do you agree that midterm election in the United States of America can rearrange the relationship between New Delhi and Washington? Can that happen?
Is this to me?
Yes, the question is to you,
Hello?
sir. Mr. Chunai, yes, the question is to you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I think, there are two very important aspects to this. So the first is that we're talking with the midterm elections, but I think the broader strategy which will concern India and which also concern a lot of people and businesses in the US is if India is going to lose its trust and belief in the US system, right? Then a lot of things that India was looking at doing with the US system, whether it is purchase of certain defense equipment
Yes.
or other electronics or other items here, there will be complete recalibration of that. It's actually going to set us back many years. And as it is, we're already seeing the new deals being announced with European countries and new explorations happening there. So I think at certain point of time, it's going to be of geopolitical and strategic interest for the US to recalibrate this effort. And like I mentioned in the opening thing, if his major grouse, and he's said it openly, is our affinity to Russia and us buying Russian oil, come December, come winter, and if the prices of crude goes up, like last 2 years, the whole world appreciated that India bought Russian oil to
Yes.
depress the global oil prices, it'll be a different geopolitical system. So I think, we got to continue trying to negotiate with them, even if the team is not coming. Open back channels. We've hired a new lobbyist in Washington. Industry should do its own role. We should continue to look at a kind of a solution, but yet at the same time, look at different alternate markets, look at reforms in India that could make Indian industry competitive, and look at supporting our immediately the high, low cost, high employment sectors to maintain at least some semblance of market share in the US.
Absolutely, absolutely. Professor Joshi, just for our viewers, a lot of people do understand the impact of the tariffs on certain sectors like jewelry, Surat market, apparels, which is Tamil Nadu, carpet industry, which is eastern part of UP. But people still don't have an idea of how our agriculture is getting hit. Can you just tell us two vexed issues when it comes to Indian agriculture? Because when we talk about American agriculture, it's just not agriculture, it's not a way of life. They're talking about pure industry-based export, which primarily comes by using large swaths of land. Here, agriculture is a way of life, small holdings. It's an entirely different ball game.
Very true. Agriculture in India is very different. That I think Americans need to understand. In India, about 45 to 50% of the people's livelihood depend on agriculture. In America, it is less than 1%.
Yes.
And despite of that, America is the largest exporter of agro produce on the earth. Say soya, maize, America account for 40-50% of the world production, and the world export almost 50-60% as well. So in India, it's very different. Despite of that, say Indian dairy industry, 1 to 2 cattle is a norm. In farm, 1 to 2 hectare is the norm. But in America, say it's a large farms, and average size of dairy is 400 to 500 cows. So it's completely different. And therefore, the number of farmers in India, they are at least 8 to 10 crore families in India, they survive on agriculture. But despite of that, if you see, the progress made in India has come out from importer of milk to the largest exporter of milk, largest producer of milk, accounting for 139 million metric ton of milk every year, which is double the milk than America produces. As well as in terms of farm product, India being a net importer of farm product, now we are the largest exporter of grains on the earth, accounting
But
for
Professor
about 40%
Joshi,
share
it's
in the
also
world market.
like, for example, as you were saying, if the Americans will be paying a higher price of shrimp, but then what happens to our produce? We are the big exporters. It means that a lot of people, livelihood, everything gets affected.
No, you are right. Livelihood gets affected, but there is, I am sure that in tough times, India will perform better. I wrote, I think 2-3 days back in a national newspaper that the times gets tough, the tough gets going, and it is going to be a game-changing, movement for India. We are trying to diversify the market. We are trying to, have our domestic consumption as well. When market closes, because America is having problem with multiplicity of the countries, not with India. Today, the whole world is America the whole world minus America, and therefore, I am very sure that with the kind of a strategy, we'll also find out some alternate market. There could be a short-term loss to our farmers, but I am sure we'll take care of this.
I really don't know, sir. You are an expert. Easier said than done. Professor Lucas, do you think that this crisis is an opportunity when existentially, in coming days, the poorer section of our society will bear the brunt?
I think you have to turn crises into opportunities. I think the value of this program and others is it has identified that what we're talking about here is an immediate crisis. This is an unprecedented administration in the United States. It is a president who is economically illiterate, who is driven by his ego. It is advisors who are warrior protectionists, some of whom have a hatred of India, like Mr. Navarro. When you have that, you have two choices. You either have to concede to the bully, or you have to go to your people, you have to go to those in the country and be honest with them that there will be sacrifices, but that there will be sacrifices where you have to work with each other to try to both ease the cost and also to look to build up. There are other countries in this world. India has a wealth of potential that those countries want. And it will take time to develop that, but you need to start the process now and not just hang on what Donald Trump might do or not do, whether he might or might not chicken out.
Okay. Mr. Chinoy, your closing comments on this. Do you think this is an opportunity? Because I feel it's easier said than done, because people are...
every crisis is an opportunity. 1991 was a crisis. We did a whole set of reforms which we actually transformed how India was looking ahead. So we should take this opportunity or the opportunity that this crisis, actually gives us, and look at what things we can do internally, externally, globally to actually insulate us from such things happening in the future. And at the same time, even in agriculture, how do we ensure that shrimps and the fish products that we export, people will buy and will demand from India. I mean, if the consumer demands Indian products, then you're going to actually have it there. So it's a real opportunity, and industry, government, and all the bodies need to work together.
Okay, thank you all of you. Thank you all of you for joining me on this. I know these are the trying times, but India will definitely come out of it. So this was all I had on all point one. But the second on point is on the Ukrainian region of Donbass and why all roads to peace pass through it after a short break.
You glow different when you're in love. 16 million shades of love to choose from. Unlimited Love V6.
आर्म पेन रिलीवर एरोसोल स्प्रेस में है, दवा के साथ हवा, मगर डायनापार QPS प्लस में है सिर्फ दवा ही दवा। इसलिए डायनापार QPS प्लस चले ज्यादा। डायनापार QPS प्लस सिर्फ 91 रुपए में, लगा के देखो मान जाओगे।
Papa, let's go to Duda. Happy birthday, Duda. Duda, I love you. Go, Duda, go. I love my Duda. I love my Duda.
Skoda.
Welcome back. At a recent meeting with Donald Trump, Russian President Vladimir Putin reiterated that full control of Donbass was the biggest criteria to ending the war in Ukraine. When it comes to peace in Ukraine, all roads pass through the Donbass. So why is the region so important to Putin, and is Zelensky ready to give it up? Putin has demanded that Ukraine give up all of the Donbas, that includes Donetsk and Luhansk. His demand includes even the part run by Kyiv. Now, Russia is now trying to seize the last 2,500 square miles of Donbas still under Ukrainian control. So, what is the strategic importance of Donbas? It is a very important coal mining and industrial hub underpinning Ukraine's economy. It is a symbolic battleground. Since 2014, most of the deadly fighting between Ukraine and Russia has occurred here. Holding or ceding Donbas directly impacts Ukraine's defense depth and influences Western security guarantees. Owing to its location, control over Donbas provides access to transport corridors and proximity to Russia's southern border. Russia uses the region as a leverage to block Ukraine's NATO aspirations and to extract concessions and peace talks. Now, part of the fight over the Donbas has to do with its complex conflict-ridden history. At one time, the Donbas used to be seen as the pro-Russian region. Many of the 6.7 million residents spoke only Russian and no Ukrainian. And 9 out of 10 people voted for a pro-Russian president, Viktor Yanukovych. And in 2010. But all that changed. In 2014, Russia seized Crimea and backed rebels who took third of Donbas. The previous president had to leave Ukraine. In 2015, Minsk agreement gave special status to Donbas area, but sovereignty disputes stalled its implementation. Initially open to autonomy for peace, President Zelensky did a U-turn after Russia's 2022 invasion. Today, it is the biggest symbol of Ukraine's resistance to Russia's annexation. Now in 2025, the future of Donbas is again uncertain after Putin reportedly demanded it to be handed to Russia during his meeting with Trump. Putin's demand for Donbas will pose a major challenge for any mediation effort. Putin demanded that Ukrainian forces withdraw from Donetsk as part of any ceasefire deal and said he would be prepared to stop fighting on the rest of the front line if Kyiv gave in to the demand. Many in the United States of America believe that these land swaps are beneficial for Ukraine because Donbas will fall soon, and then Ukraine will have no cards for further negotiations. Most Ukrainians still oppose ceding any territory to Russia, and polls are indicative. And as per the Russian constitution, it prohibits surrendering land. Now the question that emerges is, Ukraine wants NATO-like protection, but Russia started the war in Donbas a decade ago in part to block Kyiv's path to NATO. Why would Russia allow serious security guarantees now? So the big question is, will Zelensky cede Donbas and risk unpopularity in Ukraine? Can Zelensky be replaced by another leader? Does security assurance matter in Ukraine? What are the hard options available for Ukraine? And how long can Russia afford a war in Ukraine? Can Russia afford another Afghanistan? So on this issue, I'm joined by Julia Krill, Executive Director, BNK Agency. She's live from Italy. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining me. I'm joined by Ambassador Deepak Vora, former Indian diplomat. Thank you so much, sir. And Major General Dr. Rajan Kochar, Strategy and Defense Expert. Thank you so much, sir. Let me straight away go to Julia Krill. Do you think that road to peace passes through Donbas, madam?
Hi, hello. Indeed, Donbas is the key aspect of the war. As you mentioned before, it's the primary landline through which all of the troops are passing, where the fighting is happening. It is also the place with the richest resources and coal mines that Russia and Ukraine can each use for their economy, for growth of their economy. But Russia is also using Donbas as a way to promote the Russian peace. It is the key territory that was a part of historical territory called Malorossia, which includes Kharkiv, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Odessa. And this is a way, the ideological way for Russia to keep going and occupying the rest of Ukraine, because in Russia's opinion, Ukraine does not exist as a country. However, Donbas today is also a big point that divides East and West in Ukraine and is a determining point for Ukraine's joining EU and NATO. Because as a country with an occupied territory where war is happening, Ukraine cannot yet join EU, and NATO is the key demand. Joining NATO is the key demand for Russia to continue the negotiations and to find peace. Also, Russia can put all of their troops in Donbass and in the future continue moving forward into the country and occupying the rest of Ukraine, passing all the way to the border with Poland. So it is indeed a key strategic point. I doubt that Ukrainian people will agree to it, but it all depends on the security guarantees. It all depends on the involvement of United States, of NATO countries, of European Union to make sure that Russian troops are withdrawn from Donbass, and there are severe sanctions and consequences if Russian troops put foot in Donbass again.
Okay, Ambassador Vora, why Donbass matters so much to Putin? That's one, sir. And my second question to you is, do these security guarantees matter? I mean to say, Ukraine long time ago gave up its nuclear arsenal. No one helped Ukraine when Russians invaded them. I mean to say, as an outsider,